this Monday afternoon. It's the 21st of October, and so good to be hearing from Dr. Hoadley again this afternoon, Associate Professor of Politics and International Relations at the University of Auckland. Dr. Stephen Hoadley joins us for his commentary on the current political events. Dr. Hoadley, Mbula Vinaka, and welcome to Pacific Days. And so CHOGM kicks off tomorrow, which is 21st there, and the significance of CHOGM in the context of global politics and the Commonwealth's role.
Well, the significant, first of all, is for Samoa. Samoa comes onto the map. It becomes an important player. It's a centerpiece for the Commonwealth, which is over 50 cooperative countries. CHOGM is a peaceful relationship. It's not a military alliance. It's one in which mutual assistance and mutual respect are the guiding principles. And the king is acknowledging that by traveling all the way from Buckingham Palace all the way out to Apia. Well, that's quite good. And a lot of other very important figures are going to be there as well. Will it cause any substantial breakthrough? Now, I remember there was a CHOGM a few years ago, and everybody talked about climate change, rising sea levels, the threat to the small, low-lying Pacific islands. And everybody said the right thing, but has it made any difference? Well, it turns out, sadly, Nehemiah, and you know this as well as I do, that the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere, not only from normal use of transportation and heating and electricity generation and Chinese coal-driven plants, but also fighting in Ukraine, fighting in the Middle East. All of that generates carbon. And the carbon, of course, it makes the greenhouse gas shield even thicker, and that warms the Earth's ice caps even more, and that then raises the sea level even more. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that the CHOGM people will say, look, we're looking around Samoa, we can see examples of seafront erosion. We can see people who have been displaced, who've had to move their villages away from the front, from their traditional lands. We can see the damage to the reefs and other things, and that we are now willing to take action. That's my hope. I'm sure a hope shared by you, by every Pacific leader, but I'm not sure that it will be accomplished because the economic imperative of lowering the cost of goods, lowering the cost of transportation, lowering the interest rates that central banks charge and therefore mortgages, all of those forces are moving in the direction of more petrochemical use, hopefully more gas, which is less harmful to the atmosphere, but nevertheless continuing to use petrol, oil, and coal in many countries, which is still the cheapest source of energy, and that will prevail in the long run. So I wish CHOGM well. I think it'll certainly raise the profile of the Pacific Islands and those leaders and those officials, and don't forget the large entourages of officials will take back images, they'll take back personal relationships with their Pacific Island colleagues and counterparts, and that will have a good effect on, for example, trade concessions, on tourism, on diplomacy, and perhaps even solidify the Pacific Islands in resisting Chinese offers, which are very attractive, but I think somewhat subversive. All that's good, but any kind of quick fix on climate change and sea level rise, I'm afraid I'm going to be slightly pessimistic about that. But I hope I'm wrong.
Indeed. And we'll catch up again next Monday afternoon, Dr. Hoadley. Thank you for your time this afternoon. You have yourself a great afternoon.
And welcome back, Nehemiah. Nice talking to you, and look forward to doing it again.
Vinaka Vakalevu.
You're listening to Pacific Mornings on 531 PI. It's great to have your company this Tuesday. I'm William Tureti. It is 7:36. Now, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting is underway in Samoa. Now, it's the first time the biennial event has been hosted by a Pacific Island nation, and it's also the first time King Charles will deliver the opening address as head of the Commonwealth. Professor of Politics and International Relations at Otago University, Dr. Robert Patman joins me now. Very good morning to you.
Good morning, William.
Hey, look, let's get straight into it. In terms of what can we perhaps expect from this meeting, what do you say?
Well, the government of Samoa have indicated there's two areas they particularly like to focus on. One is climate change. Samoa is the first country, Pacific Island nation, to host a CHOGM. And so I think, in a sense, something like 33 of the 56 countries attending, the leaders of 56 countries will be attending. 33 of those are small states. And I think what is clear is that climate change is going to loom very hard because it is the number one national security issue for most Pacific Island nations. And I think the hosts will try to make sure that this issue gets perhaps more airtime than it normally does in international diplomatic circles. I think the second thing that's been mentioned by the host government that they're anxious to see progress on, issues like economic justice. Many of the countries attending, 56 countries from the Pacific, but also from Africa. Many of them are relatively poor and developing. And there's a sense of that internationally there is a relationship between the developed and the developing countries, sometimes classified as the have and have-nots. So I think they want to see some progress in that action. And the other thing that's been mentioned is human rights and the rule of law. What we've seen increasingly, and this is a more general point, I suppose, but it relates to that specific point, is that middle powers and small states find themselves bypassed in an international order in which major decisions are decided by the UN Security Council. And this is a chance under the umbrella of the Commonwealth for smaller countries, smaller states, to begin to push the sort of issues they want to see given more prominence on the international agenda. And the Commonwealth in the past has succeeded in making some issues much more prominent. You only have to think back to the Commonwealth's quite resolute opposition to apartheid in South Africa in the 80s. So I think there are some of the issues that may come up.
And this is perhaps a cynical view. I mean, I'm pleased that you did bring up the apartheid situation back in the 80s. But if focusing on the event of this week, is it cynical of me perhaps to suggest or ask, can we actually expect tangible results here, and it's not going to just be a meeting of niceties?
Well, the decision making is by consensus, and usually results in communiques by consensus. So, and you've got 56 countries, but I do think there is a collective sense of frustration that could result in some common ground amongst many of these countries. This is an unusual international gathering. It's one that excludes the United States, and the United States is the dominant player in most international organizations, particularly the UN Security Council. So there is this has got a diversity about it. Developing countries, but developed countries like the UK being present. And it's difficult to predict in advance, but I think two events, Ukraine and also Gaza, have reinforced the sense that at the moment, if you look at the United Nations, essentially 5 countries, and particularly 3 of the 5 who have permanent membership of the UN, call the shots all the time. And there is a real sense of frustration that many countries, and in fact the majority, are shut out of having a say in matters that affect them. And climate change in many respects reflects this. Many of the countries which have least responsibility for this problem are dealing with its consequences, with sea level rises in the Pacific 4 times higher than many other parts of the world. So this is a very real threat. And the reason I mention this is because there has been moves such as AUKUS, where 3 countries, the United States, the UK, and Australia, have come together in what they call an enhanced security partnership to try to deter China in the Pacific region and also reinforce what they call the international rules-based order. This is based on the assumption that US-China rivalry will determine the future of the world largely. And I think many countries in the Pacific Islands region reject that analysis. So this is a chance, I think, in the Commonwealth to bring home the message, particularly to the likes of Britain, that countries like in the Pacific Island nations and many other countries in Africa reject the idea that the US-China rivalry paradigm is acceptable. They see their problems as being much closer to home, things like climate change, and it's no coincidence that most countries in the Pacific Islands region see climate change as their number one national security issue. And I think that's a message that will be delivered quite clearly.
Indeed. And look, let's sticking with the Commonwealth. Yesterday, King Charles obviously was heckled by a senator in Australia. I mean, what do you make of the situation? Does that kind of scream that perhaps sentiment is changing towards the monarchy?
Possibly. It's very difficult to really look at one incident and say to what extent is that representative of a trend. But I do think, the Commonwealth meeting is largely attended by former colonies of the UK. And I think it's fair to say that there's a fair amount of disgruntlement about the fact that Britain is unwilling to pay reparations for countries where it was the formal colonial power. Although most countries, although they grumble about it, go along with that. But I do think countries of the global south and the former colonies do want to have a much greater say in the way the world's run, and they're entitled to do so. Why are countries like in the Pacific and in Africa going to have more of a say in the 21st century? Well, the reasons are quite simple. Most of the problems we face, all states, superpowers, middle powers, small states, all of those states are confronted by problems which are too big to be solved by superpowers acting alone. Climate change, global pandemics, transnational terrorism. These problems, by definition, cannot be solved by anything other than international cooperation. And that reality, these problems can only be solved internationally, means that the smaller players in the international community have much more leverage than they've ever had before. So I think this is an opportunity, and the Commonwealth, I think, a meeting will be an opportunity for the smaller countries of the world to stress their priorities.
Fascinating indeed. Hey, thank you so much for your time. That is the Professor of Politics and International Relations at Otago University, Dr. Robert Patman. You have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right, you're listening to Pacific Mornings on 5:31 PI. It is 15 minutes past 7 o'clock. Great to have you along for the ride this morning. Welcome in if you are just joining us. And now it's time to chat politics. Joining us now is PMN News political reporter Alakihifo Vailala, who is joining us live from Auckland International Airport as she is due to head to the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Samoa. A very good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Will. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Very good. I hope you don't mind me exposing you this morning, but this is pretty cool. You're in the Koru Lounge this morning, is that right?
Yes, I am. Shout out to PMN for the air points.
Whoop whoop! Oh, how good. Hey, look. Let's get into it. Obviously, we'll go there with CHOGM as you're going to be heading there today. I mean, give us an update. What can we expect from CHOGM?
Yeah, I mean, it's been not only CHOGM itself, but the monarch's visit so far in Australia. Many people have seen the heckling received by Senator Linda Thorpe at a ceremony yesterday, her calling out, "This is not my king." And it's fair to say there's a common behavior among a lot of Commonwealth members. So with those new attitudes, you can sense the kind of nervousness within the monarch, I'd say, with this CHOGM coming up. But also, it's a big moment for the Pacific region. It's the first time CHOGM has been held in the Pacific, and for Samoa, Prime Minister Fiame Naomi Mataafa has conveyed, great honor it is to host it. And I'm really excited to see what it's going to look like when I land, but also I'm expected to talk to members of the Commonwealth Youth Forum later today, as well as people from the Commonwealth Business Forum. So I will be reporting that on PMN News. So lots and lots going on the ground at the moment, but what I'm looking forward to is talking to the locals and hearing about their stories about preparing for such a momentous occasion for the island nation. But again, it's going to be interesting to see the attitudes and the views held at this CHOGM, as we know that times are changing, especially with the young people, and as climate change, is a rapid problem that's occurring, and it's great that it's being held in Samoa, so other Commonwealth members can kind of see what our Pacific Island region is going through when it comes to climate change.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's really exciting that this is taking place in Samoa. And I can't quite remember. It was the last time it was in Australia, for example, was in Perth, I think, if I recall correctly. But with all that in mind, I mean, I'd love to, obviously, since the heckling that happened yesterday, I would love to get your thoughts on it. I mean, do you think sentiment is maybe changing when it comes to our monarch or when it comes to the royal family in the UK? I was saying earlier on in the show to Levi that, I mean, look, I'm sure the king's a lovely man, but he means nothing to me more than just an elderly man from the UK, which is a pretty cynical view. But I mean,
Yeah.
do you think that sentiment is changing?
Absolutely. And we're seeing that a lot in our young people. And yeah, it's the same as me. It's a view that a lot of us share along with Paddy Gower, that New Zealand should become a republic. But again, yes, it's a common theme that's arising. And this is a question that a lot of people do ask, but why should we have a head of our government that's miles and miles away, kind of not dictating, but having a say in how we rule our stuff? But again, an interesting point to bring up actually was Galafi Moala's speech yesterday at one of the forums, where he raised the colonial catastrophes that the Western world has posed upon the Pacific region, yet they raise the question of China's influence within the Pacific region, yet China hasn't done the amount of catastrophic damage to the Pacific region as much as you'd say US or France or UK compared to China. So again, that's an interesting point that's raised a lot by Pacific leaders when it comes to kind of the scare that the Western world poses on China's influence in the Pacific, yet they've never actually done as much harm as the US or the UK or France. So again, it's those attitudes arising when it comes to these conversations being held in the Pacific region again.